I was a security guard of a forest doing my normal night round. I heard a terrified voice screaming from deep woods. I stepped off the path to help, but when I turned around, the path was completely gone. I had no phone, my radio was dead, while forest was thousands of acres of identical trees in every direction. I kept walking for hours, but then my flashlight caught something hanging off a branch, which left me with no answer. I had been a night security guard for 11 years. I watched over warehouses, parking lots, and empty buildings. I knew what silence felt like. I knew what darkness looked like. Neither one scared me anymore. But this forest job felt different from the very first night. My boss dropped me off at the gate, handed me a printed sheet of checkpoints, and spoke me single warning before driving away. Stay on the path. Don't walk into the trees. I smiled and waved him off. I was 43 years old, white-shouldered, calm under pressure. Darkness was basically my coworker. The job was simple enough. The company just needed someone to make sure no one was dumping trash or stealing timber at night. I had 9 checkpoints to visit, scan with my band, and move on. One loop took about 45 minutes. I had to complete 4 loops before sunrise. Easy work. I started my first loop at midnight. My boots crunched on the gravel path. My flashlight pushed a small circle of light through the dark. The trees on both sides were tall and close together, blocking the moon almost completely. The forest was quiet in a deep, heavy way. Checkpoint 1, scan, walk on. 2, 3, 4, all fine. But between checkpoint 5 and 6, I heard something, not an animal. I knew animal sounds well. This was a human voice, muffled, coming from somewhere inside the trees to my left. The voice sounded scared. I grabbed my radio right away. This is Webb at Hargrove. I think someone is in trouble between 5 and 6. Over. My boss came through, voice crackling with static. Copy that. Stay on the path. Don't to go in. Radio me if it gets louder. I stood at the edge of the path, pointing my flashlight into the trees. Nothing but dark trunks staring back at me. Then the voice came again, closer and clearer. This time. Which way? Which way out? I made the choice the rule book told me never to make. I stepped off the path, just a little. I told myself just enough to see. The ground was uneven, roots sticking up everywhere. I swept my flashlight left and right. No one there. The voice had gone quiet. I turned around to step back onto the path. But the path was gone. I stood still and breathed slowly. I had only walked about 15 steps in. The path had to be right behind me. I walked back in a straight line, counting each step carefully. 20 steps, 30 steps. My flashlight showed only more trees in every direction, all looking exactly same. I tried my radio static. I tried again, more static. But deep inside it, almost too faint to notice. Something that sounded like a voice. I picked a direction that felt right and walked. The ground sloped slightly downward, which gave me hope. The service road ran along, going downhill, should eventually bring me to the fence. I walked for what felt like 20 minutes. Then my light caught something ahead, a bright splash of yellow paint in the darkness. A checkpoint post, number 7. I nearly laughed out loud with relief. I scanned it, beeped. I found the marker pointing to 8, walked there, scanned it, found 9, and made my way all the way to back checkpoint 1. My heart had fully settled by then. I must have walked through the trees and come out further along the trail by luck. It happens, no big deal. I started the second loop. 1, 2, 3, 4. Between 5 and 6, the voice came again. Which way? Which way out? I stopped walking. This time I did not step off the path. I pointed my flashlight at trees and stood completely still. Radio ready in my hand. Nothing came back. Just silence, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that feels like something is holding its breath just out of sight. I kept moving, finished a loop, started the third. This time between checkpoints 4 and 5, my light caught something hanging off a low branch right at the edge of the path. A small piece of dark blue fabric, navy blue, the exact color of my uniform jacket. I reached out and touched it. I recognized the feel of it immediately. I looked at my sleeve. There was a small section recently been pulled away, but I never touched that branch tonight. I stood there holding the tiny piece of cloth. I wasn't ready to look at it clearly yet. I kept walking fourth loop. Between 5 and 6, deep inside came a voice. The voice of someone who had been lost inside 15 feet of forest for what felt like hours. Which way? Which way out? I stopped in the middle of path. Truth finally finished. Each checkpoint was a piece, the fabric, the voice, and the person wasn't a stranger. It was an earlier version of me. from the first loop, standing in the dark between trunks, shouting. Three friends went camping in the mountains on a Friday night. By 2 a.m., something was standing outside our tents. It wasn't an animal because animals don't call you by your names. We were miles from the nearest road. No phone signal, no ranger station within reach. Three sleeping bags, three tents, and water was circling us in the dark. We told nobody where we were camping, no social media, no location. So, how did something in those woods already knew our names before we even arrived? My two friends and I had been planning this trip for 2 months. Nothing complicated. Drive up to the mountains on Friday, find a good spot near lake, fish all day Saturday, sleep near the stars. I had been to this extra area before and knew a clearing hidden behind a thick tree line, right at the water's edge. Private, quite perfect. We arrived late at Friday afternoon, set up camp before the light died, and spent the evening cooking over. One friend strung his hammock between two tall pines at the camp's edge. The other pitched his tent closer to the water. I sat up in the middle. By midnight, the fire had burned down and all three of us were asleep. I woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. I checked my watch immediately, the way you do when something pulls you out of deep sleep. I lay still, staring at the dark ceiling of my tent, trying to figure out what had woken me. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving along the tree line about 30 feet from camp. Not the soft, careful steps of a deer. These were heavy. Whatever was making them was large, and it wasn't in hurry. I pressed my face against the tent mesh and looked out. The fire was completely dead. The clearing was lit only by thin moonlight. I could see my friend's tent, but I couldn't see what was walking along the tree line. I could only hear it moving in a slow arc around the outside of camp, like something taking stock of what was there. I grabbed my phone, no signal, which I already knew. I opened the flashlight but didn't turn it on, not ready to announce myself yet. Then the footsteps stopped. Then silence was worse than the sound. Then from the tree line, maybe 20 feet to my left, came something that emptied my lungs completely. A voice, low and flat, not quiet language either, like something that had listened to human conversation from a distance for years and was now trying to copy it without fully understanding how mouths work. The rhythms were almost right. The sounds were almost words. I did not move. I did not breathe. I just sat there and listened to something stand 20 feet away and speak at me in a voice that had no business existing in those mountains. Then it moved, and not by walking. The sound jumped from left tree line to directly behind my friend's tent in a way that made no physical sense. No footsteps between 2 points. Just there, then there. For the next 2 hours, it did not leave. It circled us slowly and patiently, stopping at each tent for long stretches, just standing there in the dark. It hit a tree once, one sharp, powerful strike that rang through the forest like a gunshot. It made that voice sound 3 more times, each time slightly closer to something recognizable. I texted my other friend through my satellite messenger, keeping the screen pressed to my chest between messages to hide the light. Something big outside camp would not leave. Been there 2 hours. We are okay. At 4:50 a.m., the sounds stopped, not gradually, just completely gone. Like a switch flipping, birds started their pre-dawn noise as if nothing had happened at all. I did not leave tent until full daylight. When we finally stood together in morning, the first thing I noticed was my friend's face, the one sleeping in Hancock. He was badly shaking, and I had never seen him like that before. He told us what happened. Around 3 a.m., still half asleep, he felt a presence directly above his hammock, close enough that he could feel the air shift, the way you feel someone lean over you in a dark room before you see them. He kept his eyes shut, completely frozen. Then he heard it, quietly, carefully, right above his face. We packed the camp in under 20 minutes and barely spoking on the walk back to the car. I still don't have an explanation that covers all of it. The movement, the sound, the 2 hours of patient circling. But the part that stays with me, the part I genuinely cannot explain is that we had told nobody where we going that weekend. No social media post, no shared location, nothing. So whatever was outside our tents that night already knew my friend's name, and I have no idea how. A forester who spent 30 years alone in the woods shot something in the dark. It did not die. It came back. He was miles from the nearest town. No working phone, no neighbors, just him, his cabin, and water was circling his walls every single night. An old woman in the village told him the creature had been seen for over 200 years. I had been lived alone in that forest for nearly 30 years. I knew every trail, every animal, every sound it made at every hour. It was not a scary place to me. It was home. That changed the morning I found the first footprint. I was pressed deep into the mud, along the creek bank behind my cabin, larger than any bear print I had ever seen, but shaped completely wrong. Too long, too narrow, the toe marks deep like whatever made it was standing still and putting its fully weight down. I went through every animal. I knew. Nothing matched. 3 days later there was more footprints. This time along the tree line at the edge of my yard, following the fence in a straight, unhurried line before disappearing back into the trees. The stride bothered me deeply. Too long, too even. Bears shuffle. Whatever made these prints was walking. That night I heard it for the first time. A low sound from the trees. Not quite a growl, not quite a call. Something I felt more in my chest than heard with my ears. It came from different directions, like something moving slowly around the outside of my cabin. I checked my rifle before going back to sleep. The next week wore me down quietly. The sounds came every night after midnight. Heavy footsteps, shifting gravel on my path, thick branches snapping, something dragging itself slowly along the cabin wall like it was testing the structure. I stopped sleeping properly. I kept the rifle across my lap every evening. Then one morning I picked up my phone and found the line dead. I checked the wire outside and found it cleanly cut. Not chewed, not snapped by weather cut. Animals don't cut phone lines. I saw it for the first time 4 days later at dusk, standing at a tree line 40 feet away, 7.5 feet tall at least, impossibly wide as the shoulders covered in dark, matted fur, standing completely upright and completely still. I looked directly at me with eyes that glowed pale orange in the fading light. We looked at each other for 10 seconds. Then it stepped back into the trees and was gone. I should have left that night. Instead, I made a worse decision. The next morning, I followed its tracks not into the old growth forest where the trees were ancient and the canopy blocked the sky. I followed for nearly an hour before I heard the low sound directly ahead. I looked around the white trunk and found it standing in a small clearing 30 feet away. In full daylight, it was worse. The fingers too long, hanging below its knees, almost no neck, completely still. Then I turned and looked straight at me. Then it turned and looked straight at me. I fired. The shot hit its shoulders. It stragged, made a sound that shook the branches above us. The straightened and charged. I ran harder than I have ever run in my life, burst through the tree line into my yard, threw myself inside the cabin and slammed the door. It arrived less than a minute later. The first hit against the wall shook dust from my ceiling. It circled and struck the walls repeatedly, testing them with real force this time. The door held, but the frame cracked. I fired twice through the wall towards the sounds. I stopped. I heard it drag itself back toward the trees. I grabbed my bag and rifle and drove 40 minutes to the nearest village without stopping. The woman at the village store took one look at me and sat me down without a word. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she told me about the legend. The old people call it the one who was here before, something ancient that had claimed that forest long before any human had mapped or named it. It had been seen for generations. Hunters had gone into those woods and never returned, and the ones who did came back exactly like me. Then she said something quietly, like she wasn't sure she should. She said it never harmed anyone who did not go looking for it first. I thought about the tracks getting closer every night, the cut phone line. I had circled my cabin for weeks and never once come through door. I had been the one who followed its track. I had been the first who raised the rifle first. The forest was home for 30 years and I thought I knew everything about it. One footprint in the mud proved me completely